Hello, class. Welcome to the last video, the week 7 video of PSC 583, public policy analysis. So, in this course, you've been building up to this final week where you'll have a final video assignment and you'll have final policy analysis to submit. Really, you've done everything now up to the point of developing alternatives and selecting criteria, right? So you've defined your problem well. Um, you've gone out there and you've assembled some evidence. You've selected criteria. You developed alternatives. Now it's time to do the back half, and the back half is you gotta just pick which one you think is best. Explain why you think it's best. Have a solid rationale based on the criteria you set forth. Given the alternatives at hand. For why you chose what you chose, and tell your story. Ultimately, if these analyses just sit on a shelf, they don't accomplish anything, right? So you need to sort of uh, make it a digestible, reasonable, interesting analysis and presentation that can be something that whoever your boss, committee, your client, whomever is looking for the policy analysis can chew on and think about. Give them clear trade-offs to bounce around in their head, and give them clear rationale that's logical and understandable based on how you organize and designed your criteria and your alternatives as to why you're recommending what you recommend. So as you get through the back of the eightfold path, I think you're over the hump, right? I think we can do this all in the last week because it's all downhill from here. You've put the hard work in. You've done the hard research. You've done the hard data gathering. You've done the hard work of metric specification, which is really what criteria selection is. You've done the hard work of alternative analysis and development and analyzing. And now the last back half, you just put it together and tell the story. So this should come together pretty naturally. There are a few pitfalls that I think are common that you could fall into, and I want you to think about these a little bit as you move forward into this week. One is, like, if you have a pet solution in mind from the beginning, they sort of warn you off about this week one, but really, if you have and you have all along, and you're just like, this whole project and this whole 7 weeks has been a process of you sort of rigging things, so to speak, to come to the conclusion you already wanted to get to in the first place, and you knew you wanted to get to in the first place, it's gonna probably be a weaker analysis. And if you leave yourself open to be a little bit surprised about what you recommend in the end of the day, right? So I hope you went into it with an open mind and left yourself, a little bit of room to alter your prior opinions that you had going into this and think, oh, maybe actually, now that I'm looking at the data, now that I've learned a little bit more about it, this is important or that is important, or what I thought would be good maybe actually doesn't work for this group of people or that group of people. So hopefully uh, you've done a little bit of that, and you've come to some sort of a solution that actually surprises you a little bit, even if it doesn't totally shock you. Um, I think that's one like pitfall people can fall into is just the whole thing becomes a circular logic of justifying what you wanted to do before you did anything. Um, I think that the second pitfall people can fall into is they just end up, and this is why Bartek and Potashnik recommend just doing 2, 3, whatever alternatives and not having too many. They end up imagining too many options, right? And they start trying to compare 14, 15 different options. And of course, there are infinite options out there. There are never only 2 or 3 alternatives. Policies like playing jazz. There's a couple guidelines set forth by constitution and law, but other than that, you can do whatever you want in the middle. As long as you're roughly keeping the beat and not driving the crowds away, you can have a lot of fun with it. It's some freestyle, and so it is a creative process. It really is like playing music. And if any of you play, um, and you've just kind of jammed out before, you know what I mean. there's a lot you can do, and there's really no limit to it, and that's a daunting thing sometimes. So sometimes uh, when you realize that, you get overwhelmed, and the thing to do is, uh, if you find yourself in that spot, just keep it simple, keep the beat. Minimize the number of alternatives. Use big popular ones that are out there and already spoken about or easy to measure, or something like that, in order to just play something that fits and get you through, rather than just get totally overwhelmed and stop and kill the music, right? Um, so I think that's a second pitfall that happens to people sometimes. You really want to avoid that this week. There's not a lot of time for it, and so if you find yourself in that boat, just simplify, shed extra things, boil it down to the couple best alternatives and criteria. Um, and I think the final pitfall maybe people fall into is you didn't select your criteria specifically enough in the first place. So now you're here at the end talking in vague generalities about, well, what we'd like to do is improve frequency, but you don't say by how much, right? Or how that would be measured, or and so it just sounds like this kind of wishy-washy, vague document of wishes, and it doesn't sound like an actual analysis with kind of deep planning that anyone could execute if they chose an alternative. And that's really what you want to avoid, and hopefully last week, caused you to avoid. So if you kind of avoid those three big pitfalls, don't just talk in wishy-washy generalities. Don't just like backwards engineer your solution you wanted all along anyways. You might land on the solution you wanted all along through an honest process, but try to give it an honest process. And don't just like freeze up because you just have too many options and you can't just pick a couple. At some point, just pick something and play it and go with it. And you can't write 100 pages for this. So pay attention to the structure. Keep it at the length that it's asking you to do. And if you have to go a lot longer, think harder about what it is you actually really need to say, and boil it down to that. I tend to find when I write too much, and I have to go back and sort of shed a lot of it, and grind it down until it's a little more polished. And if you're anything like me, maybe you have to go and do that. But that's what this week's all about. So I hope you've had a good class, and I hope you've enjoyed the video aspects of it. It's a little bit different than some other classes I do for that reason. And I look forward to seeing these final assignments, and wish you all the best as you continue on your journey toward your MPA or your certificate or whatever it is you're trying to get accomplished. Bye now.